The Black Lives Matter movement protests came back with fury in the spring of 2020 after lying dormant for several years. The Black Lives Matter movement can be most notably tied to its roots in the civil rights movement. Lori Collier Hillstrom, notable author on American history and current events, in her novel Black Lives Matter, From a Moment to a Movement, published in 2018 by Greenwood, details these many similarities, some of which include their purpose, demonstration tactics, and their cause. While it was the death of Emmett Till that sparked the civil rights movement, it was the death of George Floyd that became the face of the Black Lives Matter movement in 2020. Journalist Ruth Richardson from BBC News details the incident in George Floyd, What Happened in the Final Moments of His Life, published in July of 2020. It was Minneapolis officers Derek Chauvin, Thomas Lane, Tao Teo, and J. Alexander Kueg that killed Floyd on camera. George Floyd was held on the ground for 7 minutes and 46 seconds, calling out for his mother and repetitively pleading that he could not breathe. The events that followed Floyd's death transpired quickly. Derek Bryson Taylor, New York Times journalist, in George Floyd Protests, A Timeline, published also in July of 2020, details the many events that followed. With President Trump's disturbing message, when the looting starts, the shooting starts, coming out on May 29th, just 4 days after Floyd's death. It was responses like these from President Trump that contributed to the growing population of Republicans that have decided to vote against him in the upcoming election. With a student who would prefer to remain anonymous, we will call her Paige Smith, she answered many questions about this in an interview. She explained that she has grown up in a conservative home, but after seeing the way that Trump had acted in response to the Black Lives Matter movement, she does not feel comfortable voting for him. Protests that followed Trump's public threat have grown exponentially worldwide. Namal Yogathon, journalist with a PhD in communication studies in Black Lives Matter movement, uses creative tactics to confront systemic racism, published by The Conversation, also in July of 2020. He details the many unique strategies that protesters used in this movement, some of which include acoustical agency. Chants like "hands up, don't shoot," and "no justice, no peace" were very common. This tactic was used to unify a crowd of voices into one message. Another chant used was "Say Her Name," which directly refers to the death of Breonna Taylor on March 13th. Mamie Locke, professor in the Department of Political Science and History at Hampton University, in Whose Lives Really Matter, The Invisibility of African American Women in the Political Discourse of Black Lives Matter Campaign, published by Virginia Social Science Journal in 2016, speaks about the environment of Black women erasure in the Black Lives Matter movement. Despite the fact that Taylor was murdered before Floyd, many months prior, her case still lacks justice today, which is very common for Black women in the movement. Despite founding the movement, they still lack visibility in these protests. In another interview, student Grayson Sage shared her experience protesting and her rationale for attending. She explained that she felt, as a white woman, she could never fully comprehend the extent of Black Americans' fear and trauma from police brutality. Therefore, showing up on the front lines of protests was her way of using her white privilege in the most effective way possible. Sage also said that protests she attended were primarily peaceful, despite many protests seen in the media turning extremely violent between either police officers and protesters or looters and property. At the end of the day, Black people are being killed by the people in uniform they are supposed to be able to trust when they're in danger. If it was your friends, family, and neighbors, would your protests for their lives stay in the lines? Should a smashed window discredit the pain and suffering that you and your ancestors have been experiencing for centuries? The Black Lives Matter movement may be an election issue, but it should not be a matter of politics. because human lives are not debatable.